Hello, this is Jack Zenger. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Transforming Technical and Professional Expertise into Extraordinary Leadership. I'm joined today by three more colleagues. Joe Folkman, the co-founder of the company, will kind of carry the bulk of the content here with me today. Tracy Consolini, our Regional Vice President, will have an offer for you at the end of today's webinar. And Deborah Morris, one of our senior account executives, will be our chat host for today. So if you have questions or comments that you'd like to have answers to, or that you'd like to kind of pass on to us, please type them into the chat room, and Debbie will do her best to respond to you. So with that, let's jump right in. You know, when I was a graduate school student many years ago, there was a very common belief that a manager was a manager, that he or she could move from managing a pickle factory to a high-tech company, and that management was a transferable skill that could just carry you anywhere. And then a few years later, Harvard published a book called The General Managers. And in that book, they came to the very strong conclusion that the evidence that they had was that general managers of virtually every company they encountered were technically extremely able. And so, you know, what we've seen as organizations being complex, and as we go through this, you know, the elements of this slide, the research shows that most general managers are highly knowledgeable about the technology of the business that they're in. That a key certainly to the success of a younger employee is to develop deep expertise and professional acumen. And that myth prevails, however, that managers can be portable and can move around and can lead organizations everywhere. But again, the research from Harvard showed that in the main, it's very rare for a general manager to not be really well versed in the technology of the firm. And then along in 1993 came a really fascinating study. A couple of scholars were looking at the very renowned Bell Laboratories institution. It was kind of the, you know, the heart of all the research on semiconductors and in the early days of digital telephone connections. And what they found was that within Bell Labs, it wasn't the most technically competent people who were the most productive and made the biggest contributions. Instead, they found that the best performers were those who combined their technical prowess with some other qualities, some other characteristics that magnified their technical strengths, but certainly enabled them to deliver outstanding results. And so, Joe, tell us a little bit about our research.
Well, when we looked at the data, and again, you look at the influence of technical professional acumen on overall leadership effectiveness, and we broke leaders and individual contributors into separate groups. So we had top managers, and individual contributors. If you looked at those who were in the bottom 10% on technical expertise, notice that their overall leadership effectiveness score were equally bad, right? That it affected top managers just as much as it did individual contributors. Now, most people would say that this is absolutely critical for an individual contributor, but maybe a top manager doesn't need to understand the technology as well. But if you go up to the 11th through the 35th percentile, you can see how these are always the same. And so the point of this graph is that your effectiveness on technical expertise has a great influence on how you're perceived as a leader. This is a critical skill no matter where you are in the organization, whether you're an individual contributor, a manager, or a top manager. We also looked at this over age. And when you look at it over age, what you see is that if you look at the male population, their technical expertise starts off around the 42nd percentile, and then it increases over time. And you can see it generally goes up, and they end up at the end of their career at 61. Some people end their career at 61. I don't know who they are, but anyway, at about over the 50th percentile. Now, if you look at women, in the females, in the first part of their career, they're actually rated higher than men on technical expertise. And then men sort of jump up, but it's pretty equal over the length of the career. But, you know, you see this tendency for high performers that throughout their career, technical expertise increases. And that's natural. I mean, that's normal because they gain experience, they gain knowledge, and they get to know things that they didn't know before. Now, we did an interesting study with digital expertise. One of our clients wanted to measure that. They defined this as adapts technology and digital developments that can create competitive advantage for the organization. So they really measured their leaders on digital expertise, and we had data from 180 leaders on this one particular capability. And when we looked at it, we found that there was a correlation between this digital expertise and overall leadership effectiveness. If we looked at the people that were the worst on digital expertise, they were at the 22nd percentile. You can see they were 28 percentile points below average. And those in the top at 10%, they were 17 points above average in terms of overall leadership effectiveness. And so as we looked at that data, the conclusion was that not having digital expertise really hurt you if your results were poor on that, if you didn't have that digital expertise. But on the positive end, it didn't help as much as it hurt. And so it was this negative thing that could really hurt your performance in terms of that expertise. Now, as we looked at this over age, what we found is that 100% of those up to 30 were above average on digital expertise. But as you see there, as people aged, that digital expertise went down. In the 61 to 70, only 22% were rated above average. And so you can see there that on at least digital expertise, competence went down as they aged, but on expertise overall, it tends to incline. This really hurt people. And so again, another factor that influences people, and maybe a watch out for people who are a little bit behind on digital expertise. It can have a negative effect on you.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to invite you to go back to the slide, or think about the slide that Joe showed earlier about the fact that leaders increase their technical or professional acumen through their careers. And I guess I'd just like to have us all kind of think for a moment about, why would that be necessary? What is there? What's happening that makes that such an important issue? And we wish we had the ability to kind of hear all of your comments, hear all of your responses, but let us just kind of think about a few of them together. It's pretty clear that complexity is increasing in organizations. The second thing that's happening is that then leaders need to understand the technology on which their organization is grounded in order to lead effectively. And because technology sort of continues to increase virtually exponentially, those who don't understand the basic business technology are of really limited value to their organization. And finally, what we see is that competitors are constantly innovating. Clayton Christensen, the late Harvard professor who talked about the importance of innovation and talked about disruption. We're seeing disruption occur in so many industries and so many technologies. So leaders need to inspire innovation within their own organizations.
You know, to give you a sense of the impact of technical acumen and expertise, we looked at high potentials. And what's as we looked at people that were selected as high potentials and compared them to other leaders who are not high potentials, you can see that the high potential leaders and even those in top management were rated more positively on their technical acumen than those who are not high potential. So we feel that having really good ratings on technical expertise helps a person be considered a high potential in their management.
Now, what's really fascinating about today's topic is that it's an extremely important capability that leaders have, but it's necessary, but not quite sufficient by itself. And we've scratched our heads thinking about what's the right metaphor to convey that point. And we've come to a kind of a simple one. Rowing a boat with one oar is very difficult. Yes, it's true that you see people with a canoe kind of using one paddle and going back and forth between one side and the other. But in a regular rowboat, if you paddle with just one oar, you end up going in circles. You certainly don't get very far ahead. And so the metaphor we'll present to you is that technical acumen needs to be paired with other capabilities. And one of those capabilities that sort of creates a second kind of oar is the whole capability of being driven for results. So Joe, kind of talk about our research on that.
So we did a study. This is based on 103,000 leaders, and we looked at skill in technical professional acumen and drives for results. So we looked at the group that was above the 75th percentile on technical professional acumen, but below that, they were below the 75th percentile on drive for results. And then we looked at those in the 90th percentile overall. We call them the extraordinary leader. So what's the probability of you being an extraordinary leader if you were really good at A, but not so good at B? And the probability is a whopping 8%. And so we've started this story, and Jack says, well, you need more than that. So then we looked at people who were really good at technical or drive for results, but not as good at technical expertise. So good at B, not so good at A. And we looked at the probability of you being an extraordinary leader, and this is 12%. So if you were choosing, well, which competency is the most useful, is it A or B? It's B, drive for results, gets you more. But if you looked at the two together, if you were good at A and B, 75th percentile on both, you'd expect 20%, but you actually see the probability as 78% chance that you'd be a great leader. The point here is it's this powerful combination, the integration. And you know people that are really great at drive for results, but they don't really know what they're doing. And you know people that know everything about a particular technology, but they're not very driven. They kind of don't get around to it. The combination of those two really make a difference.
So another possible or that helps kind of balance this technical capability was kind of researched by our good friends at Google. Back in 2013, Google commissioned a project that they labeled Project Oxygen. And they were looking at the behaviors or characteristics of their employees who were producing the very highest results. And they made a list of the capabilities that they displayed, and they're presented here on the screen. Being a good coach, communicating well, listening well, possessing insights into others. You can read through them. What you see there is what some people would describe as soft skills that many have observed are probably the hard skills, but these skills were the ones that they found were most prevalent and were most predictive of their highest performing individual contributors and employees. Now, we would invite you to kind of think about what strikes you about that list. Go back just a second, Joe, if you would. What strikes you about that list? What's missing from that list? What you don't see on that list is this person was an outstanding software programmer or a systems analyst or a computer engineer or software engineer. The technical things came in 8th and 9th place. And so this was a pretty shocking revelation to Google that had so prided itself on hiring people for their technical competence. Now, the next study, it was commissioned in 2017. They called it Project Aristotle. And it was apparently kind of focused more on teams and team effectiveness. And what they found was that they looked at those people who were kind of thought to be the best, brightest, came from the most prestigious universities, and they kind of just refer to them as their A teams. And then there were some other kind of B teams, people who had come from some of the more prominent state schools, but they were not considered to be the high prestige technical institutions. And they looked at the output of those two teams. And what they found was that these B teams that didn't always think of themselves as being the smartest people in the room, but it was those that produced the most productive, most usable, most marketable ideas. They came from the B teams. And the qualities that they found so prevalent in those B teams were qualities such as treating each other with equality, with generosity, being really, truly, seriously curious about the ideas of your teammates, being empathetic to each other in terms of what was going on in your life. In general, people who just possess those things that we globally refer to as emotional intelligence, self-awareness, treating people with respect. And it was fascinating that they found these other qualities that these groups that were so productive were able to create a climate of safety where people felt free, felt confident to express views to each other that weren't always popular, weren't always mainstream. And there was never any bullying. And this was a big revelation to Google. And it's a great lesson to all of us about the fact that, yes, technical competence is important, and we're going to keep emphasizing that, but the technical competence needs to be balanced with some other qualities. This drive for results on the one hand, or these qualities of these very important soft skills, empathy, listening, cooperation, these things that really make organizations truly work.
So after we read these articles, Jack, we decided to do a study of our own where we looked at IQ versus EQ, right? Intelligence versus emotional intelligence. And here's the study that we did. We looked at people who were low on the technical expertise and low on the people skills, and we looked at their overall leadership effectiveness, right? How were they rated as a leader? And they were only rated at the 12th percentile. Then we looked at people who were high, and high is top quartile here. So the top 25% on technical skills, but low on the people skills. Now, being good at technical skills, but not really in the bottom quartile on people skills, they only moved up to the 30th percentile. So wonder if you were good on the people skills, but low on the technical, bottom quartile on the technical, but high on the people skills. How did these people come in terms of overall effectiveness? They shot up, they almost doubled their overall leadership effectiveness. Message, if you only choose one of those, I mean, people skills get you more than the technical skills in terms of that. But let me show you the creme de la creme, the ultimate package, if you will, the employee that really makes a difference. High technical skills, high people skills, they're at the 90th percentile. They're in the top 10% of leaders. And so, you know, this combination of understanding what's going on with the technology, but also understanding the people skills. And so we looked at some outcomes based on this. And we had 2 engagement index items. One was, I'm confident this organization will achieve its strategic goals, and I'm satisfied with this organization as a place to work. These were items that were only responded to by direct reports. And as you see at the low group, these are at the 32nd percentile. But if you go high technical, low people, notice that the confidence goes up to the 41st percentile. Having high technical skills gives people the sense that we're going to be successful. But then if you said high people, low tech, now we get, again, that bigger lift up to the 58th and 59th percentile. But again, doing both well, move people to the 70, or move direct reports to the 74th and the 72nd percentile. Having both skills and doing both skills well made a huge difference. And as you ask the question, well, how did you measure the people skills? These are the 6 items that we use to measure people skills. And notice that we're measuring communication, trust, cooperation, inspiration, coaching, and acting as a mentor, and staying in touch with concerns of individuals. So we actually really measured items from 5 different competencies here to get at those people skills.
As a practical application of some of the things we're talking about today, let us just take you on maybe a brief detour and talk about the STEM disciplines. When technical acumen dominates, this becomes a very interesting example of what happens. Now, so that we're all talking about the same thing, the STEM disciplines have been sort of used as an example, or used as a descriptor of science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and recently we've added medical to that definition. So many of us work for companies that may be described as being in those kinds of disciplines, or we have within our organization people who represent those specific kinds of disciplines. So what we're about to describe to you is relevant to some people because of the company they're in, and to others of you to different functions within your company. Our partner over in the UK came to us and said, you know, we're just really curious about the differences between the people in the STEM disciplines and the people who are in non-STEM disciplines. Would you help us do some research on that? So fortunately, we were able to honor that request. And what we found, sure enough, was that leaders in the STEM disciplines were seen as having significantly more technical acumen, technical prowess, than their non-STEM colleagues. And so you see them at the 51st percentile versus the 49th percentile. What was fascinating was, and now Joe can then talk about the implications of this in terms of their overall leadership effectiveness.
Yeah, and so if you look at this and you look at the overall leadership effectiveness, so we split them here, to STEM, non-STEM. So the dark blue is the non-STEM and the light blue is the STEM, and then the male and the female. You can see that on overall leadership effectiveness, the STEM people in STEM were rated significantly lower as leaders. And this is a real challenge because I think, they love the technical parts of the work and they're good at the technical aspects of the work, but they're not as good at the people elements of that. What was fascinating in this was the difference between the males and the females. The females on both the non-STEM and the STEM were rated more positively than the males in their overall leadership effectiveness. And so this is a interesting effect. So we think that those people in STEM that are really good technically ought to, sort of listen to this and sort of say, so what do we do? Is there some solutions to how we can be better leaders? And we're going to jump into that right now.
Joe, I think for those of us on this webinar who are in the HR function, it really maybe sends a great signal about where might we invest further development, particularly on those people skills that would make our STEM executives, the ones in research, the ones in quality assurance, the ones in the technical, the engineering arena. How do we help them leverage their technical skills and go far higher in terms of their impact on the organization by partnering them with those other capabilities?
Yeah, it makes a real difference. So we did a self-assessment. One of the things that we measured in the first part of the self-assessment is your preference for technical expertise. And really, I was going to call this "Are you a nerd?" scale, but I shouldn't say that,
No.
But this is the extent to which you love technical things, you enjoy them, you have a strong preference for them. And again, the scores range from -10 to +10. So if you have a negative score, you don't have a strong preference for technical. If it's in the mid range, the 1, 2, -1 to +2. You're kind of in the middle on that. And if you're high, 3 to 10, then you have a stronger preference. Now, surprise, surprise. I mean, we tend to get more HR people than engineers on this call. So the average score is about -0.68, so right around 0. So, as you think about the average there, the average scores are low. But let me just show you to show you the validation of this. What we found is with about 200 leaders, we found that if you scored low on these preferences, -10 to -1, your average technical expertise score was at the 48th percentile. If you were in the mid, it went up to the 64th percentile. And if you were 3 to 10, it went to the 67th. So there's a correlation between how you rate yourself here and how others rate you on technical expertise. Again, we're saying that technical expertise is a valuable skill, and doing it well is going to help you as a leader. So, Jack, how do you improve?
Yeah, so because it is important, it's necessary for success in so many companies. Obviously, there are some things that we can do that we've broadly described as linear kind of development. And that obviously means keeping up to date in the literature of that field. Being willing to kind of study and take courses, to seek out within the organization people who are particularly capable and use them as mentors to you. To at the end of projects, take the time to kind of say, what did we learn from this? And how can we how can we apply this more effectively? And we would describe all those activities as very linear in their approach. On the nonlinear side, we would say, it would really help if we could understand which behaviors enabled those leaders with acumen to be even more effective. What are those behaviors that magnify a person's perceived competence in this given field of ours? And for those people who have adequate levels of acumen, how do we help them utilize those behaviors in a way that truly magnifies their effectiveness? And that led us to do some research then on what were those kind of almost catalytic kind of behaviors that create that second or, and that second or then enhances the person's technical acumen. And we found that there were indeed 6 capabilities, 6 behaviors that came out as being very positively correlated with technical and professional acumen. And you can see them there: solving problems, building relationships, communicating powerfully, developing broad perspective, taking initiative, and acting in the team's best interests. So let's take a moment and talk about each one of those. Solving problems. One of the world's leading experts on strategic thinking and strategy says that good strategy is basically solving problems. Solving problems is a valuable way to increase the value of a person's technical skills. And by applying it, by applying that acumen to immediate problems, it unleashes the value of the technical knowledge that they have. And so we think that this solving problems, bringing their technical expertise and their knowledge to bear on very important and urgent problems really does allow them to kind of apply their knowledge in a useful way to finding practical solutions to the organization's issues.
The second strength builder here is building relationships. And I remember several years ago, one of my friends, Larry Hinks, he attended a conference, and Larry and I have always been really good friends. And at this conference, someone was presenting a paper that was basically, not negative about a book that we wrote called The Extraordinary Leader. And so Larry, got some information on this particular presentation. I was not at the conference, he was. And when he got home, he sent me that information. Now, this was very helpful. I would have never known about this. It didn't go anywhere. Nobody really read this. But because Larry and I had a relationship, he knew that I would care about this, and he got me the information. As you think about relationships, only when a person develops strong interpersonal relationships is the full extent of technical professional expertise seen and utilized by others. Positive relationships lead to the acquisition of new knowledge, and that's what happened to me with Larry. But also it leads, it gets us information, and it puts people in a better position to accept insights that we have from technical expertise. And again, going back to this study at Bell Labs on these star performers, I mean, if you think about Bell Labs, there's more brilliant people there. And they first thought that if they were separating the star performers from the average performers, that it would be the intelligence. So they gave everybody an intelligence test. And guess what? They found that everybody at Bell Labs was really smart. They couldn't differentiate anybody by intelligence. But when they looked at the people that were getting the best results, that had the most kind of projects that were getting funding and going through, they found it was the soft skills. It was just like we said, it was staying in touch with colleagues and giving credit and listening to others' ideas. It was all these relationship interpersonal skills that really differentiated these best performing scientists at Bell Labs. So it's the combination of these two. I think we've harped on this a lot, Jack, through the presentation.
Yeah, so the third catalytic strength building behavior we discovered was communication. And that's certainly no surprise. Communication is the vehicle by which leadership capability is transmitted. And no matter how smart a person is, if they don't communicate well, clearly, in simple language, in compelling terms, then nobody knows about their capability. And so we submit that the second or created by this ability to communicate effectively really does unleash technical capability. The what, why, and how, knowing, so helping other people to understand what needs to be done, why does it need to be done, and how is it best implemented is extremely valuable to them. That way they know how to do it, they know why it's being done, and finally they know kind of more effectively what do they specifically need to do and how does this all link to their job.
And Jack, in our research, we found that communicating powerfully is the easiest skill to improve as a leader. And yet it's one that we oftentimes don't do very well. The next one is broad perspective, developing a broad perspective. And as you think about what happens in organizations, as people start in an organization, they're kind of broad, they're sort of not specialized, but over time, there's this motivation to specialize and to get narrow and deep and become the world expert at something. I have a brother and he's a professor. He's a professor and he's an engineer. And he wrote this book. And the book one of the books he wrote, he was a co-author on, is called Buried Pipe Design. And it's all about, really sewage systems and what kind of pipes you have to put in and how they work and all this other stuff. And he's a world expert on this. Now, I just wrote a book called The Trifecta of Trust, and you can buy my book for $17.95. You can get a copy of his book for $106. So you can see who's doing the best in terms of price of book. But not very many people are interested in buried pipe design, right? No. I think more people are interested in trust. But having a narrow perspective, this really hurts you in terms of your capability and your effectiveness as a leader, and especially because you're so narrow, you're not connecting what you're doing with the strategy and direction of the organization. Having this broad perspective helps you see how what you're doing affects how what other people are doing, and it helps solve problems and it helps integrate. And again, this particular skill was very important for people to kind of really build their technical expertise.
The fifth thing that came up on the list of very important behaviors was taking initiative. So this combination of expertise and initiative kind of moves acumen into action. And so seeing opportunities to apply your knowledge, especially outside of your immediate work area, to others really is a very, very powerful contributor inside companies. A very interesting author named Craig Jarrow made some fun kind of musings on the topic of initiative. And he said, those who wait for the perfect time will wait forever. So stop waiting for the planets to align, stop waiting for life to slow down, stop waiting for the perfect time. Whatever you are waiting to act upon, do it today, and while you still have the time. I've often thought that the hardest step for most of us in most of the elements of life is the first step. It's getting started. It's kind of getting the ball rolling. And so this notion of the importance of taking initiative as a very strong partner to having strong technical expertise is pretty logical.
It really is, Jack. And the sixth one is around acting in the team's best interest. And those who consistently put the team's best interest first are perceived as more trustworthy. This trust is often extended to include their technical professional expertise. Now, others trust that their decisions are based on their expertise, their facts, the data, but not on their biases or ulterior motives. If you look at the data and if you look at, this ability to be trusted is trusted by all members of the team, and your perceived technical expertise, what you see is that if people distrust you, they doubt your expertise. These two things are interconnected. So if people feel like you're going to take care of them, you can be trusted, you're not doing things for ulterior motives, that really helps them trust in your expertise and give you the benefit of the doubt. What's interesting about these six, Jack, is they cover such a broad set of issues. And as you think about how can I improve my technical expertise beyond just knowing the basics of the business and knowing the technology, these cover, the taking initiative and communication and relationships. There's just a lot of different ways to do this, and problem solving is another good one. Well, we measured your effectiveness on these six strength builders. And on the self-assessment, you got back the feedback and you can see your scores on this. Again, this is a 5-point scale. And so this range of the scores go from 1 to 5. And basically you can see, which ones you scored high and which ones you score low. This might give you some sense about, or one of these may be a fatal flaw for me. Is there one that's really getting in my way? Or is there one that I'm pretty good at, but could I get better? And so that's what that's for. We also, in section 3, gave you an assessment on your technical expertise, where you rated your own technical expertise. And again, your score on this is interesting. It gives you a sense for that. I was interested, I looked at the data on this one, Jack, and I actually found that the average score here was 4.05, and which is a really high score. And so people tend to believe that their technical expertise is pretty good. And again, this is a self-assessment. So the only way you can get a really good assessment on this is from others. So you might want to consider doing that. Now, so what's the impact of this? Well, let's say you have a fatal flaw in any one of the 6 strength builders. If you do that, and we looked at data from over 100,000 leaders here, your average effectiveness on technical expertise, if you're terrible at any one of these, is at the 35th percentile.
31st.
Yeah. So if you have a fatal flaw, we sort of recommend that you fix that. Now, a lot of people, when they go about improving, they say, well, I'll try to make everything better. So I'll try to be above average on everything. So we looked at our data and found if you were above average at 1, your effectiveness went to the 36th, 2 to the 45th, 3 to the 52nd, and if you were above average on 4, it went to the 58th percentile. So this whole idea of, I have to be good at everything, while, yeah, it works, but it's hard. There's another approach. And again, as you know, as if you've read any of our literature, we believe in this idea of strength building. And let me show you the impact. If you were just really good at one of those 6, your average effectiveness at technical expertise goes to the 70th percentile. Really good at 2 goes to the 78th percentile. really good at 3, going to the 83rd percentile. So if you don't have a fatal flaw, our recommendation is you find a strength to build. And again, Jack, talk about how they might choose.
You bet. So we are going to encourage you to, in the aftermath of this webinar today, to kind of think about one of those strength builders for development. And obviously, following up on what Joe just said, if you have a really, really low score on one of them, our thought would be you might want to tackle that one first, do some things that would strengthen that. But for the majority of you, that won't be the case. And so we then would encourage you to say, what behavior can I identify that would have a significant positive impact on my performance in my current job? And so think about those things. Which of those 6 strength builders, really feels like one that you could work on and that would make a big impact as seen by your boss, as seen by your peers, as seen by the people who report to you. And then the other kind of filter to kind of use, we think, is, yeah, but am I reasonably excited about that? Do I have the energy to kind of pursue that? And obviously, the one or two that you have the most energy for will be the ones that you are most likely to kind of really work on and push to a much higher level. So as you complete the questionnaire for this webinar today and the exit survey, you'll receive a development guide that will give you some practical suggestions about what to do. It's always kind of, we're always curious about what did people hear that kind of rang a bell or that felt good. So if you wouldn't mind just jumping on and saying, which of these 6 would you be inclined to kind of work on in the coming days and weeks? And just to respond to that little survey that you have in front of you about which of the strength builders will you choose. This becomes valuable information for us as we think about creating future development experiences. So let's just see what the answer is. What's your guess, Joe? What's gonna win?
Well, we showed that dramatic data on building relationships. So maybe that did, but then I told him that communicating powerfully is the easiest one. So
and I made an impassioned speech about taking initiative. So let's see what the answer is. So the results are, yeah, communicating powerfully 1. Okay.
Oh, he sucked him in.
A third of the people chose that one. Okay, well, thank you very much for doing that. So if you would, when you complete the exit survey, you will receive access to the development guide. And with that, I want to turn the time to our colleague Tracy Consolini, and she has a message for you. Tracy?
Thanks, Jack and Joe. As you discussed, the complexity of our business environment requires leaders to have great technical knowledge. Maintaining and building that knowledge is an ongoing journey for many. We know expertise must be accompanied by other leadership capabilities to maximize their impact. And Zenger Folkman's micro-learning sessions are designed to sharpen those skills. In addition to a micro-learning session focused on technical expertise, we have a number of topics available. These sessions are relatively short in time, but high on impact. Participants walk away with one thing to do differently to magnify their effectiveness, a slight behavioral shift that is integrated into everything they do, making development so easy. To learn more about the sessions, you can contact us via email or complete the exit survey that Jack mentioned. Feedback is a gift, and we welcome yours. We'd love for you to complete the exit survey that will launch as we conclude, or you can use the link that's in chat After you complete that survey, you'll be able to download the development guide that Jack mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your participation and hope that you'll join us again next month.